Democrats, I think, probably went into after Trump was getting elected, maybe they were under the illusion that it was going to be very easy to get donations.
Yeah, I'm not sure how they thought that. Like, didn't raise that much money. The party itself didn't raise that much money even when he was running, and they were scared out of their minds.
Yeah,
and that's when people are. If you're going to collect money, it's usually during an election year. If
right.
a significant one.
I think they're under the impression that people don't. Have Trump is hated a lot more than he actually is.
Yeah, he's not. This is reality. He's not.
Or that he'll be, or that he's hated to the point where he will be that people are desperate to get him out of office. Yeah. And I don't think that's true. I think they misunderstand why he won the election. My take on it is that much of Trump's support was a protest vote against the political establishment.
Yeah. I know a lot of progressives who voted for him, and if they push another progressive or if they push another neoliberal, they're going to do the exact same thing.
It was a vote for somebody that staked himself outside the political establishment, never held political office, and people were willing to throw the vote, and the mainstream media was telling everybody not to vote for because he's so horrible. And sometimes, there is such a thing as reverse psychology. Mm-hmm. If you tell people to not do something enough times and keep telling them,
people will do it just to piss you off. Like,
people will do it, especially if they don't like you.
Yeah, especially if they were going to go vote anyway.
Right.
They're like, well, shit, I might. Whatever, fuck it. Nobody's gonna know.
I see him mostly as a protest vote, and which raises the question: if he was a protest vote, what are people protesting again? And are Democrats adequately responding to those protests? And I don't think they have at all. I think that what they're doing instead is shooting the messenger. They're shooting, figuratively speaking. They're targeting people who voted for Trump and, trying to paint them with
which is like the worst strategy ever.
Trying to paint them with a broad brush, which is never a good thing. Ultimately, if you want to get, I think, in a democracy, if we still have a democracy, and that's a serious question in my opinion. Whether we
did you watch that CIA video?
No.
Man, I'm gonna send you that. That's
okay.
It's somebody who literally just recently retired from the CIA, and he's been going on tour around the country.
Okay.
Like within the last year, telling everybody everything, distinguishing the difference between the shadow government and the deep state. But he was very clear that both of them are absolutely real. He talks about his relationship with John Brennan and he's. Yeah.
I think issues relating to the deep state, to the real levers of power in this country, which are not in our visible government but are in our invisible government, and are carried forth through the CIA, the FBI, the military. That's the real issue. Yeah. In this country. Unfortunately,
it was such an issue that JFK got assassinated over it.
Right. Well, there's a line of assassinations that go back to JFK. And go through RFK, MLK, Muhammad X, you name it. Yeah. I mean, you've got the deep state involved in all of those. Yeah.
Yeah. Any group that's legitimately about for liberation and rights, black, for example, the Black Panthers. Yeah. They were considered and still are considered a terrorist threat by the FBI. And I always was curious: was it because they were pro-black liberation, or was it because they were very open? Yeah. They allowed everybody to be a Black Panther, and they weren't telling you, hate that party or that party. They were saying, stop being capitalist, because call out imperialism, all the things that we pretty much talk about now, and they had a legitimate following behind them as well. And so a lot of people were waking up not just to how Black people were being treated, but also how the world was really working. And so groups like that have always been labeled, McCarthy, during the McCarthy era, they were communists. They're communist sympathizers, which is actually what I was going to bring up too, which was that I feel like with Bernie, for example, when it comes to the Russia narrative, he was in politics during the McCarthy era, probably in the beginning years of his political career. And so he saw what happened. And I mean, to put it quite frank, to put it quite bold or bluntly, is that you don't get to be president if you at all look like you sympathize with Russia during the McCarthy era.
Right.
Like at all. You can't even don't even speak to a Russian.
Well, I would put it even more strongly than that, Niko. I would say you don't get to be president of the United States unless you're willing to play ball with the deep state.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. But I'm just saying, as far as the big picture is concerned, you know, look at what Jill Stein sat beside Putin.
Right.
Investigation.
Yeah, I mean, we've actually gotten even. I mean, I would even call it a hyper McCarthyism. Although, you know, back in the McCarthy era, I mean, people were losing their jobs. They were being purged from government. They were being, you know, now it's mostly in the realm of rhetoric, political rhetoric.
That could damn
hysteria.
you for the way it's worked now is that you don't have to lose your job, but you won't be able to reach a level, you know, where you can make a difference.
To the extent that people actually buy into this hysteria, and I'm wondering if people actually do. Because, I mean...
The average person? No.
I mean, to me, it's very bizarre because I thought that the Cold War was over. And suddenly it seems like the Democrats have decided that the Cold War shouldn't be over because...
We also thought that the Democrats loved Julian Assange. Remember that?
I mean, I also thought the Democrats took positions against corrupt police departments, but we're finding out...
And they also used to be against the deep state, and they used to blow the whistle on the CIA and the FBI.
Right. Oh, I mean, this is
they defend them so ruggedly.
It's baffling to me. I mean, here you have probably the institution that was the single most... in terms of responsibility for crushing progressives, besides the Democratic Party itself, would probably be the FBI.
Yeah.
You know, Martin Luther King. I mean, you know, I just read a book recently called "The Plot to Kill King," which was written by a lawyer for Dr. King's family, who actually pursued a case in a civil case at their behest, which established by evidence that the FBI was 100% behind that plot.
Oh, yeah.
Behind his shooting. And this is not widely known. I mean, we don't talk about this on
I actually talk about that every Martin Luther King Day. I do.
Well, I think that's my stance as well, is that if you
also talk about the fact how they co-opted his image as well.
Right.
While demonizing everybody else, they demonized Malcolm X as if he was like all he wanted was violence. Like there was no rationality behind anything he said. They demonized the Black Panthers. They demonized Huey P. Newton. And with Martin Luther King, it's you know, we have all these schools and streets and everything because he was about peace, and that's how racism that's how racism disappeared because you didn't defend yourselves and you were docile and just woke up one day and everything was fixed, and that's not how it happened. There was a good amount of violence and there was a good amount of peace. But
well, here's the interesting thing. So, you know, getting back to sort of the Bernie Sanders discussion, and you know how, in order to become president, you have to, in my opinion, you have to play ball with the deep state. Well, one of the interesting things that's not widely known, and I only learned this through reading the book, is that Martin Luther King was in the process of announcing, he was going to announce that he was going to run as a third-party candidate for president.
What?
Yes, on a ticket with Benjamin Spock, who was a very widely loved pediatrician, anti-Vietnam War. It was going to be basically a combination civil rights, anti-Vietnam War ticket, which was going to be extraordinarily powerful at the time in the 60s, and that this was the trigger point for the FBI to finally get rid of him because he was going to organize this incredibly powerful campaign. If you think about at the time, you know, Martin Luther King.
At the time, the parties hadn't had such a huge stronghold.
We talk about how Bernie Sanders is the most popular politician in the country. Well, at the time, Martin Luther King filled that role and then some. Okay, and he was across demographics. He was across race.
There was and you couldn't. I mean, think about it. At that time, how are you going to convince the world that every single black person in the country didn't vote for him? Right. You couldn't rig it. The electronic machines weren't as popular.
Right.
There's no way that you could legitimately, every single black person ever would be voting for him.
Oh, and
if they voted, it would be 99.9%.
It wasn't just going to be black people.
But that's the problem. Exactly.
I mean, this was from the deep state.
But you eliminate the Republican Party totally out. Like, well, not totally, but pretty much you eliminate them in the sense that you have to account for the big cities. Yeah. And although the big cities tend to go kind of blue, but like you said, it wasn't going to only be the big cities.
No, it was.
And then
going to be
all the blue states you win the big cities if you're Democrat. So at that point, it would have been his opponent would have been Lyndon B. Johnson.
Right. This was so my understanding is this would have been 68, and that would have been the year that Humphrey ran against Nixon. So he would have because Johnson decided not to run.
But the Democratic Party didn't know like what was going to be the outcome.
Right, but it would have. I mean, there's no question that if you put Martin Luther King on an independent party presidential ticket with Benjamin Spock in 1968, that's a body blow.
Yeah, at the very bare minimum, you're hurt. Yeah.
Oh, that's an absolute body blow, and and
was this announced before or after the Million Man March?
So this was, it wasn't announced. It was, the lawyer who wrote this book, he was close friends with Dr. King.
And the lawyer was friends with both Dr. King and Muhammad Ali.
No, he was friends with King and Spock.
Okay.
And the lawyer was actually very involved in the anti-Vietnam War movement, and he had actually been to Vietnam and charted all the atrocities that were going on there in the name of American imperialism. And he actually brought those to Martin Luther King's attention, and King was like, we have to do something about this war. And I'm going to stand up and get involved. And so part of that strategy was he was going to run on that ticket in 68.
He was very much so anti-imperialist.
Yeah.
But they don't talk about that.
Oh, no, that's never... But he was like, I can't... I'm seeing pictures of children getting burned by napalm. I've got to do something about it morally. And this was going to be a very, very powerful... Because, this is going to be like two enormous strands of the American political movement at the time coming together, which is civil rights on the one hand and anti-war on the other.
Is the guy that got 300,000 people.
That would have been.
That would have been.
It would have been an incredible moment. Probably the moment that could have turned this country around.
Yeah, I tell people all the time, like with his assassination at the time, JFK's assassination, we didn't react the way we should have. We were like sad that they were gone,
right?
And it was a lot of sadness and but he meant so much, and that's
right.
But what should have happened is like, oh hell no! I know for a fact that all these people didn't get assassinated within 3 years of each other because by coincidence.
Yeah.
It just, especially at that time during a McCarthy era,
right.
During an era of there was a lot of political assassinations.
Right. Well, he was after I can't remember if he was shot before or after RFK. I think it was before RFK. It was actually before the primary. So RFK was the next to go after MLK, and of course MLK came after JFK. And what you really had was this was the
RFK coup. was anti-Vietnam also.
Well, he moved to that position. Mm-hmm. He moved to that position. He became very much a progressive figure, and in some ways was I think he was galvanized by what had happened. But this is the deep state coup in action. This is where it all went bad, in my opinion. And what really
it's crazy if they try that now.
Yeah. Well,
they had much more control.
Yeah.
Back then.
Well,
but they're losing. Well,
they don't. Yes, that's a good point. The media was a lot different back then. You didn't have a split. First of all, we have a mainstream media, but it's split, right? We have the CNN and the MSNBC on one hand, and we have the Fox on the other. So already they tell different narratives, often opposing narratives about the same things that are going on. And then of course you have the whole independent media, which we really didn't have anything like this in the 60s that would allow, for, truly independent voices to have sizable audiences and to get the truth out. So it was they did have a lot more control. What really bothers me, I just want to say this about Martin Luther King, and then maybe we could, if you want to move on to something else.
Yeah.
This just bothers me more than anything, is that his family never let that assassination go. Okay, it's not like the Kennedys who, it's always been curious to me that here you have people from the same family getting gunned down.
Anyone
who looks at JFK knows that JFK was killed by the government. Okay, you look at the evidence; it's just no longer really an open question.
To the point where they couldn't even totally declassify his case.
Yeah,
right. Remember when Trump released something about it?
Yeah, there's still classified stuff. There's probably still some very
what's to declassify? If the guy was supposedly an independent actor. And he posted up, he shot him, and he moved on.
Well, we don't.
But it wasn't
all
that.
The evidence shows that Lee Harvey Oswald was a CIA asset, and that he was maneuvered into place to take the hit for this, and that there were multiple assassination teams in Dallas, and it's very no event in American history has probably been so meticulously documented as the JFK assassination. It's just not. The exact contours of what happened are not common knowledge because, of course, the mainstream media will never cover it to this day. But what bothers me about MLK, in contrast to JFK and RFK, is that the family never dropped the issue. Mm-hmm. His wife hired an attorney to sue in order to prove that the government was involved with MLK. So when we overlook that, we are actually not in accord with the family's wishes. Mm-hmm. Okay, they're not happy with Martin Luther King just being a holiday and sort of like a picture on the wall. Okay,
and when I'm here,
he
would still be alive.
They wanted him.
It's highly likely he would still be alive
to fulfill his destiny. Yeah, which I firmly believe, having now really looked at his case in detail, I firmly believe that he was on the road to being the kind of transformative political figure, not just a civil rights leader, but an actual elected political leader of this country who was going to put us on a different track. Yeah. And that was taken from us. Mm-hmm. Okay, and his family, who I think more than anyone has ownership of his memory, has not let that go. They went to the trouble of actually hiring a lawyer to do a full trial on the issue, and yet nobody knows about it. I mean, nobody knows about the details of MLK's assassination. It's completely erased from history.
Yeah. I mean, his assassinations were erased from history, Malcolm X's, like I said, Huey P. Newton, pretty much anybody who, there were people who were fired from their jobs because they were very active in the civil rights movement, very active in the political movement as well. They were professors, PhDs, had no issues, no criminal background, no nothing. And the moment they spoke out for any type of liberation, it was, they're clearly communists, so we have to fire them. I mean, it's scary because you always wonder, wow, why would anybody, knowing what happens, why would anybody pursue a position that could make them end up at JFK?
I think that may be one answer to why the political class in this country is so morally bankrupt. Yeah. Because the only people who would pursue it are people that are already, compromised in their approach. Either
compromised or you're hopeful, like my dumb ass, that you can somehow in which I guess now if you were to be helpful, now would be the time. Mm-hmm. Because once again, my motto, self-interest is self-defeating, and oftentimes, for example, like when they created Facebook Live, they thought it was going to be a bunch of dumb people doing dumb shit, recording basketball games, recording themselves singing, and it's like, you ended up allowing an avenue for a bunch of independent journalists to come on and document. And then you created groups for us to share our information in, and so we became consolidated. And then, you know what I'm saying? And then you made it so that we could track everything. So whenever you do come up with the bullshit narrative and try to corroborate it, we're like, nah, because that's not possible because X, Y, and Z. Yeah. Like we knew, for example, when they talk about the Russia bots, I'm like laughing. I'm like, they're literally just using Machiavellian tactics. Mm. It's you blame your enemy for whatever you're doing. Right.
You project your own sins upon your enemy. Mm-hmm. Is what's going on. It's the oldest psychological tactic in the book.
Yeah.
They do it again and again. To an extreme degree.
And we all know that David Brock and Media Matters, they were the ones who originated this shit. Yeah. And it's funny because they only talk about that on Facebook and Twitter. However, as somebody who's on YouTube obviously a lot, it happens more on YouTube. Yeah. Much, much more on YouTube, but it never gets discussed. Right. And it's likely because, we know who runs YouTube. Yeah. It's Google. They're going to be like, wow, they were able to infiltrate Google? Well, we should look more into this. And then they're going to go back and remember, oh, shit, Google was working for Hillary.
YouTube is less of a discussion community and more of just a place to park videos. So in a way, I mean, when Google...
but in the comment section...
Yeah, but Google can make those videos disappear by snapping its fingers, and it's what they do now. I mean,
they can make videos disappear, but the comments are all like very disruptive and divisive pro-Russia people.
Yeah.
All the pro or not pro-Russia but pro-Russiagate people, but the people who are that they describe that were anti-Hillary, anti-everything, like those people pretty much by and large are not, like, if they are people, they're legitimate people.
Yeah.
Because you can tell by the difference in their like syntax, the way they structure their sentences.
Right.
It's clear a lot of the times at this point when somebody's a bot, because their responses are almost the exact same every single time. It's like they have this you say something about Bernie now, and their immediate response is, well, he was working with the Russians. And it's like the same conversation. I'm like, I just had this conversation with somebody, and it was the exact same response.
But they want everybody to have these conversations because it's distracting from the real issues. I mean, if we argue incessantly over nonsensical propositions like Bernie Sanders was working for the Russians, what even that means, I don't know.
I know, right?
We're not focusing on what's going on now and what needs to be done now, and that's the unfortunate thing about it. I do think that the internet and social media are, I think it seems like you'd agree with me, have been a net positive in terms of, changing the consciousness of people. I don't know where we would be without. I mean, we'd be back in the dark ages.
Yeah,
okay?
Like I said, I feel like the outcomes have been totally. I feel like with the self-interest, which is the money part, because at the end of the day, no matter, I don't give a damn if you're the deep state. Putting food on the table is our most basic instinct.
Yeah.
And I feel like the CIA partnered with Mark Zuckerberg. I'll send you that link. You actually understand what I mean. They're super connected with Silicon. They said like 90% of Silicon Valley is owned and bought and paid for by the CIA.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. And we're not going to actually achieve progressive policies by, being good, loyal Democrats. It's never going to happen like that.
Yeah, and it's almost as if they've been like working on making good, loyal Democrats for since pretty much as Bill Clinton.
Right.
Pretty much as Bill Clinton.
Well, no, it goes back farther. I mean, it goes back to McGovern, in my opinion. I mean,
I forgot about George McGovern.
He's the original Bernie Sanders, down to
when he got screwed over.
Yeah, down to like the $30 a day or $30 average donation. I mean, he had the same thing. He was beloved as sort of a kind of the same platform, the same sort of willing to speak out against the establishment. And he was undermined by the Democrats.
What year was George McGovern?
Well, is 68. The nomination was taken from him.
He won the delegate count, but they took it from him.
Yeah, they basically pulled shit at the convention.
Same thing they did with Bernie.
But then in 72, he got the nomination because there had been the 68 convention was so ugly that he actually. But then they undermined him in the general. And
they actually worked against him?
Yes, there was an anyone but McGovern campaign. Anyone but McGovern, started by the Democrats after they nominated him. And lo and behold, who was running that campaign in anyone but McGovern? Jimmy Carter.
He was running the anyone but McGovern?
Yes.
Really?
Yes. Jimmy Carter is sort of...
That's kind of
in some ways, he's a false idol because... I think he was directly responsible for killing McGovern's chances of winning 72 against Nixon. And then, of course, the next Democratic Party president was Jimmy Carter. And we think of him as this, progressive, shining light, I guess, in a sea of, puppets. But it's not. I don't think it's true. It's the case. I think there's a lot more to that story. I think the Democrats were... much like with this election, where I think they preferred Trump to Bernie Sanders, I think they preferred Richard Nixon to McGovern. And they did everything they could in the general once they had nominated McGovern at that convention because of what happened in '68, they undermined him in the general, and Nixon won in a historic landslide. So,
it's the exact same situation.
And that's why we have
Nixon wasn't quite as bad, but he was
we get
kind
superdelegates from. Is from the McGovern experience, and that was specifically the reason for superdelegates was to make sure
the guy who fucking created superdelegates. I think Bernie ended up hiring to his fucking campaign.
They wanted McGovern to lose big so that they could always say, any progressive that we run is going to lose big. Look at McGovern, and so we need to have these superdelegates. Who ultimately pick a candidate that can win, and so the only Democratic,
which they didn't do. It doesn't. I mean,
well, they didn't do it this time.
Yeah,
but
they thought that she could win. I think, and it's funny because you got to think maybe in their circles because all they were like, it's Hillary, and in their circles it probably was the sentiment, but.
Yeah,
look what happened.
It's
your circles aren't really reality.
They're looking at polls that confirm their own bias, right? Anyway, we should probably get going. I need to.
We're actually recording already.
Oh, we are recording. Yeah. Okay.
We're recording.
I didn't realize that. Okay, that's cool, man. No, I mean, look, nothing I say on camera is anything I wouldn't say off camera.
Joking. He's not joking.
And vice versa, but and this is something I go through in, and I was just saying that because, in about 25 minutes I got to pick up my kids. So I wasn't actually sure we were recording. But,
so
with McGovern, I look at that as the precedent for what happened to Bernie Sanders. I mean, look at the anyone but McGovern movement.
So what was like? I think a lot of people kind of because there's so many different parts of the book that people specifically remember. What was your favorite part about the book, or what was the thing that you most vividly remember? Like, okay, this was extremely impactful. In your opinion.
The hardest part of I would say the most vivid and the hardest part of the book for me was writing about Shawn Lucas and Seth Rich. Mostly Shawn Lucas because we hired him.
Yeah.
And to relive that and relive the moment when we found out that he had dropped dead. On his girlfriend, or he was discovered dead on his girlfriend's bathroom floor, right before as we were responding to a motion to dismiss for lack of service of process. I mean, that was very difficult to relive that and to think about how to convey that in words. Yeah. And there were times when I was just kind of like laying motionless on my couch, because I just couldn't get up because. Just a lot, the wave of emotion that I was feeling. Because I've really never felt so helpless.
That's exactly the way to describe it.
Yeah, in my life.
People don't know the hell we went through to try to get an autopsy.
We're still going through this hell now because, people are still not paying attention. People are still not really taking, more larger society. Lost. What's that?
More lives are being lost.
Yeah. And now we've got, all kinds of, crazy events going on. And we have a general feeling, I think, of a breakdown of law and order in this country.
Yeah.
And I think that is what concerns me most. I mean, I've kind of put a lot of my progressive ideals and policy wishes sort of on the back burner because I sense a real crisis.
I feel the same
erupting.
Way. Yeah.
And I think, the first thing I would say to fellow progressives is, really, there's no hope for us to implement progressive policies until we have a functioning democratic system in this country.
Yeah, and that's not something. And you might be able to partially use the system to get there, but it won't. It won't be if you think it's like, if we get the right person in at the right time, then they're going to be able to affect change by themselves. Mm-hmm. And that's just not the case right now. Because I tell people all the time, one of my biggest worries is that when Bernie Sanders gets in office, that he doesn't pick his administration. We know that Barack Obama didn't pick his administration. It was set up from the very beginning for him to be the fall guy for everything that Hillary wanted to do. It's very fucking clear that was the case. To the point where he's been implicated in such a way that now he has to play ball as much as anybody else. And even though Bernie does not take corporate money, There are other ways to get somebody to play ball, and so that's always been one of my. That's why you can't stop fighting because the right person gets in office. In fact, that's probably when the fight begins because that person's going to get fought every step of the way.
And I think we're seeing that with Trump now. There's look. I mean, there's been a lot of disappointment that I've registered from people who supported Bernie Sanders very fervently. They don't like the stances he's taking now. They feel in some ways that Bernie Sanders has abandoned them. And I feel that people who sort of stood in the same relation to Trump are going to be feeling some of that disappointment too.
Some people do already.
And they already are. I mean, Trump ran on a platform of drain the swamp. Yeah. I think that's what a lot of people heard, and lock her up. And if you want my opinion, I mean, of course, there are other things that he ran on as well, but I think those two issues resonated with a lot of people, and I don't see swamp draining going on with this administration.
Total opposite, actually.
And
you brought the swamp monster in with Henry Kissinger.
What I see is a lot of. I will say that Trump does very well as sort of a spokesperson, as a person with a bully pulpit, who very rightly criticizes the media, points out instances of corruption in the FBI, DOJ, but so far he hasn't done anything about it. He has Jeff Sessions as his attorney general, who I think is...
Who is establishment to the core?
Yeah, establishment to the core, who seems mostly interested in prosecuting medical marijuana, which...
Yeah, what the hell?
Beyond me, I mean, that's not a winning issue on either side of the aisle, by the way. That, if you want to talk about a sort of consensus issues in this country, I think medical marijuana is one of them, and that's why you have states in every part of the country right now adopting medical marijuana programs.
Yeah, not
just
some people think that it's only Democrats.
No.
Nevada,
it's everywhere. No,
Florida.
Everybody's in favor of like herbal medication,
North Carolina,
as an alternative to pharmaceutical stuff.
They just they're trying to Schedule 1 kratom now.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Well,
actively, they're trying to claim
that was found in Shawn Lucas's system along with 2 other substances. It was a very strange combination, I'm told, and one of the things that hasn't been fully explained to me. And people with medical knowledge have looked at. We haven't gotten the full autopsy, by the way, from Shawn Lucas. We've only gotten
that's what I was.
Police report.
They refuse, by the way, and this is something I've talked about often on the show. The moment that happened, Jared and Liz acted immediately. The first thing, of course, that you would think is, okay, let's get the autopsy, right? So I was still in New York when this happened. Jared and Liz tried to get the autopsy, and they were pretty much, they didn't give it to him. So I even tried. They didn't give it to me. And then I even had a private investigator, Ed Opperman, try, and they wouldn't give it to him.
Yeah.
And then the only thing that we got were police reports and articles.
Yeah.
About
we got an email which described the findings of the autopsy report, which is not.
But not the autopsy. But the autopsy is supposed to be. It's supposed to be public record. It
should
be.
I mean, in any. I think functioning legal system. I think documents related to investigations, deaths. I mean, they should be.
Because this wasn't even a high profile murder or suicide,
or whatever it was.
Whatever you want to call it.
We don't know.
It wasn't supposedly like the Nicolas de Cruz case.
Yeah.
It's not even it should be open and shut.
Yeah.
But it's not.
Well, it's the same police department that is quote unquote investigating. I guess they're still investigating Seth Rich, if you believe them.
This is the same police department.
Yeah, the DC Police Department.
Oh, they're not investigating the Nicolas de Cruz.
No, not Nicolas. I'm talking about Shawn Lucas.
The DC police department's investigating Shawn Lucas?
Well, but they're the ones that we corresponded with to get the what they call the death report. And the extent of their quote unquote investigation was to apparently run an autopsy and say that the death was accidental.
The DC police department. Funny enough, so I met this guy who used to be the chief of the police department. He was actually a black guy. And he said that he spoke out because he knew that it didn't make... Because that's back in the day when the police were in the communities.
Yeah.
And he said, I don't know where these guns are coming from. I have no idea where these drugs are coming from, but they're not coming from inside this community. And I know it's coming from somewhere outside, and we're going to fight to figure out who it was. The moment that he said that, they were like, no, you can't do that again.
Wow.
And they made him step down. I mean, think about it. That's not the only time that's happened. The Seth Rich case with the female police chief, I wish I could remember her name, but when she was like, I don't know where this narrative is coming from that it's a botched robbery, we never said that. And then, she tried to pursue her investigation. They say it's ongoing. Then people say it's over. But then she says she steps down because it's just way too corrupt. And
$500,000 in reward money for a so-called botched robbery. I mean, come on.
Who's $500,000?
Well, in Seth Rich, people have put up. The total is. I mean, you're talking $500,000. You think you would get that case solved by now? I mean, that's a lot of. But obviously,
especially for something that's supposed to be open and shut, you got the most, most highly surveilled.
Generally, people are gonna, if somebody was involved in a botched robbery like that, generally you would think that their friends or their family or acquaintances are gonna rat them out for a chance of $500,000.
Hell yeah, $500,000. I'll bail you out. We can even get a lawyer. Shit, $500,000. We'll make it stretch. We can invest $100,000 in cryptocurrency and make that flip for another $500,000.
Well, that's the biggest red flag to me about that case is it just so. I mean, besides the fact that he was found with his.
I would say the most consistent pattern in red flags of what should make anybody in any situation, especially in today's environment, have a red flag is once they start shutting the conversation down. Once the investigation is never actually pursued, or whenever people try to shut down your opinion about the situation before there was ever an investigation, and then the little bit of investigation that has been done, they totally disregard any of its findings. I mean. Another good example of that is with not just with Seth Rich, well, not even just with Shawn Lucas. There was another situation. Klaus Eberwein is another one.
Nobody talks about it.
Nobody talks about it.
Nobody talks about it. And that happened, in Miami.
The Mayo Clinic situation. Mm-hmm. You can pick one. Or even Pizzagate's probably the best example because I did a video and this is before I knew much about it. And I was probably trying to avoid reading into it because I already knew what it was going to end up looking like.
Yeah.
But I did a video saying, I've seen people had their houses ran inside of because they had one too many cars pulling out of their driveway. And they were being investigated for weed because of that. J. Cole has a video of this, by the way, the rapper. He had a video where the cops ran in his house because he had way too many cars coming in because he was a rapper, so producers were coming in.
And so that was enough for them to go have probable cause to run right in.
Send a SWAT team in his house. So what you're telling me is, despite all the proof, that at the very bare minimum, there should have a proof that should have, at the bare minimum, led to an investigation. Yeah. But instead, it's don't ever speak of that, or it's a conspiracy theory.
We're going to shame anybody who asks questions.
And then what happened to Ben Swan when he did his initial Pizzagate video, and it was straight facts. He didn't say anything that was an opinion at all, and he was linking everybody together.
And now the same thing is happening with this Parkland shooting. Okay, people ask questions. They ask questions. They're not theorizing. Okay, They're not coming up and saying, like, I think, all these kids are lying and this is all like a hoax. I mean, there might be a few people that say that, but by and large, the people that are the object of basically what is a smear and shaming campaign being led by political elements in the society, they are people who are simply asking questions and rightfully asking questions because if you trust the government and law enforcement at this point, I mean, you're just a damn fool. Yeah. I'm sorry. Yeah. I'm sorry. I'm just going to... I'm sorry. I mean, there's just too much...
There's no reason to trust them.
There's too much evidence for anybody who, wants to look at it, not to trust official narratives and to be skeptical of them and to ask questions. In fact, I think it's essential to self-preservation at this point. But
they've made it pretty clear thus far. I mean, I'm sure you heard about what Obama did in 2012.
Which was?
He passed, he signed off on a bill that allowed, it was an executive order that allowed propaganda. In fact, not just allowed it, but encouraged the propaganda from the State Department.
Right, legalizing,
and it was primarily used in foreign affairs. Now, what is the best way? Because like you can't. People would say, well, that doesn't apply to what we're seeing with Russiagate. I say it's the total opposite, which is that it absolutely applies to what we're seeing in Russiagate. Because what's the best way to propagandize the rest of the world? You show it from your home, and then you make everyone else echo the same sentiments, and it's going to directly affect how foreign affairs it takes place. And it happened. It was in 2012, literally around the time that the Uranium One deal started becoming, coming into fruition.
That's right.
To like the sale of the Uranium One deal.
Yeah.
So
no,
it's almost like they were planning this, like just in case, because it's not because we didn't. They may have had to pull the trigger on it earlier than what they were expecting. I think that's part of it. I think they were expecting her to perhaps come under investigation after she won, or even before she started running. But it didn't get caught on to until much too late. And so they just pulled the trigger on something that made no sense. The timeline didn't make any sense. Nothing about their claims make any sense. When people argue with me about Russiagate, I'm just like, look at the fucking timeline. And look at the blame they try to place. At first it was what? It was Gucci for two, right?
Right.
And it was to hack the Podesta emails, and then it was WikiLeaks, and then it was WikiLeaks, and Julian Assange all of a sudden is working with Gucci for two, and then it was Julian Assange all of a sudden working with Russia, and that was his incentive, and then they established that Julian Assange and Trump never made contact, but he tried to actually get emails from him as well, and they're like, oh, but clearly they're working for each other. And then it was Trump was working with Russia, and it was Putin who hacked the election, and Julian Assange and Putin and Gucci for two, and all these people are all working together simultaneously.
Right.
It made no sense. It was like, it's like a lie you tell your mom after you didn't want to give her your report card about what happened to it.
That's a great point. I mean, the narrative itself is a moving target that originally was about hacking, supposed hacking of a server or multiple servers, and then that's shifted to 13 random people in Russia running like the response to that Facebook was sites. I mean, maybe spending $1,000 in Facebook ads a month in an election that costs $6.4 billion. And by the way, last time I checked, I thought we had free speech in this country, which applies to foreign governments as well. I mean, there's nothing wrong with a foreign government buying advertising on Facebook. And
I would say that
we have free speech.
We know for a fact that it wasn't connected to the foreign government, because they actually didn't even mention the Russian government. And in fact, they were very careful not to mention the Russian government.
Have you actually seen those ads? They're not the stuff they were buying was like
you know what else they did. They were pretty explicit in saying that they had no contact with the Trump administration. And so now the narrative has become, he's not doing anything about this. He doesn't care. It's like, hold on, no, that's not what you said. Remember, your argument was that he was working with them. But now it's you and everybody. First it was be outraged because he worked with them. And then you couldn't find any link. Then it was be outraged that Putin was working, for him. And then it was he was blackmailed. Then it was be outraged by the dossier. And then now it's be outraged that he's not doing anything about Putin, who you said the only reason that he was mentioned was because he was working with or for Trump. And now you can't establish a link, but you still want to be mad about something he supposedly did. Mm-hmm. It just doesn't make any sense. And I feel like it's common sense. And
but you're dealing with people who are propagating this narrative. You're dealing with people that they get their news from these sort of, it's brainwashing. So an authoritative person on a screen shows up. They're a picture of authority. They tell you something happened in an authoritative way, and it enters your brain, and now that's your reality. And that's
Joanne Reed, Anderson Cooper, and Rachel Maddow are they don't speak in any type of. There's no reservation there.
There's no nuance.
There's no nuance. There's no reservation. It's very if you don't believe this, then you're not
right.
You're not on our team.
They're delivering. I mean, it's the same type of propaganda technique that's used in North Korea, and keeps the North Koreans in line, which is authoritative delivery of information over the television, and then North Koreans don't have social media like we do. So in the social media world, which is, somewhat opposed to what's going on in the mainstream media world, you have all these tactics that are designed to make us look and feel like we're crazy.
Yeah. Interestingly enough, I think North Korea is another weird situation, because why would you allow... Like, we could take out Kim Jong-un and his regime, and it literally would be a 30-minute run. Yeah. We took out Gaddafi with an entire... He had an army. I mean, granted, it took like 30 years to do it, but...
Oh, it would be very easy to infiltrate North
Korea. We could take one of our smallest brigades.
I don't think we would need to do it. I think we would work with the South Koreans to do it, and
we could do either one.
I think between us and the South Koreans, we've probably already heavily infiltrated the North Korean government, but it's more convenient for us to keep that government around, because it keeps it's an enemy focal point.
It gives us a reason to remain in South Korea.
There's no reason that a country. Their
people are too poor. They can't fight. Like what they're going to do? They're going to galvanize the troops. Like the troops can't even eat rice.
The North Korean leader actually went to high school in Switzerland, a very elite private school. Which
him and his sister both, actually.
Yeah, and that school is attended by elite level political operatives from all over the world. There's no question that he has been infiltrated, in my mind, and that the North Korean government is a puppet regime being run by...
So how do you feel about the sister speaking with the South Korean leader about, if they pass a private letter off? That's all I know. They say it. And a lot of people are speculating like they're tired, because the Koreans are tired of us being there.
Oh, absolutely. The South Koreans have a history of being very angry at the continual military presence
it's
there.
Almost like no reason at this point.
And I think, look, Korea's been around a lot longer than we have as a country. They've gone through periods of unity on the peninsula and then great conflict on the peninsula. And, North Korea fighting with South Korea is not their first time. They've had, but I think in this day and age, my sense is that the Koreans are probably looking to consolidate at this point, just because the geopolitical situation is getting, with the erosion of the U.S. empire, it's a scary time. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's no question that the U.S. empire is eroding right now. Mm-hmm. I mean, the domestic problems that we're having is a sign of that.
Yeah, and these are the domestic problems that usually happen right before the end of the empire.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. This is every empire throughout history always runs into the same problem, which is that they overextend their reach, they bite off more than they can chew, and then they suffer enormous problems at home, and then the whole thing, contracts.
Yeah.
And so if you're in the South...
I have my own theories about that, too. But I feel like that's by design. I feel like there is a element, even if some people would even call it like a supernatural element, but it's almost like this conscious, because I feel like that we're all part of this conscious, and there's something within a conscious of a specific group of people that where obviously, as we know, like the deep state, they're all connected generations, and they keep making the same exact mistakes. But is it like a mistake, or is it that when people start to grow a conscience, peace becomes the norm. Yeah. So people have time to invest in their intellect, their education, experiences, things like that. People have more money now, even though the income inequality is horrible. But the access to goods is probably higher now than it's ever been.
And the access to information.
And the access to information is higher. And so with that, it's like every empire, the exact same thing happens. Yeah. The elite somehow go crazy, like make the most irrational decisions, and the people are convinced that this leader is actually doing their job. And next thing you know, all hell breaks loose, and they continue going into wars that they can't win, and it's almost at this point like it's orchestrated.
Yeah, well, people, they say that history repeats itself for a reason, and why it repeats itself is an interesting question, and that's
because we have all the tools to prevent it. You know what I'm saying? Like, we have all the tools to prevent it. We had all the tools to prevent ourselves from becoming Rome.
Maybe it's a population. It's a natural population control. To keep people, when there's too many people relative to resources or
but even that's a farce, though. The idea that we don't have the resources that we need.
Right.
We have more than enough food. We could easily grow. We have more than enough land to grow as much food as we want to. We control there's not enough oil. Motherfucker, we have so much oil.
I mean, I think it might come down to the fact that human beings are, in some ways hardwired to be hierarchical, and to dominate other people.
I think that there's an element of truth to that, but I feel like there's a conscious effort in place to push that. Like that identity on.
But then again, we overcome our hardwiring all the time.
Exactly.
When we make a deliberate effort to do so.
Yeah. Hell, if you put a bunch of people who hate each, think about high school. How many people there are people right now that because of Facebook and the way the political atmosphere, ended up evolving, I don't talk to at all.
Yeah.
And it's because of their political views coming into fruition on Facebook. But in high school, you almost have the question, like, is that actually your view, or are you quoting that because you feel like that's what the majority of your supporters, your followers, your family, or whatever feel? And so you don't want to look like the outlier and have to deal with that when you confront them. Because in high school, where there are some people who say racist things that regularly on Facebook, in high school they hung out with pretty much everybody was mixed. They never said a racist word out of their mouths. They had us over their houses, and it was like. But it's like I said, it's like it's orchestrated because you get into that point where it's, I guess, like a fight or flight thing, and when we get pushed towards being hierarchical, which is what we are, like with money, with race, with social media, even with the media itself, we get pushed into a hierarchy. Like, don't listen to the independent media because that's the fake news, and it turns out that it's the total opposite. With the FBI. Where we're being told to all of a sudden we need to love the FBI and we need to respect that authority because they're the authority. If we can't trust them, who can we trust, right? That's the fucking question we're trying to answer right now. Thank you for,
On that note, man, I think I'm
it's about that time. Thank you so much, man.
Call it a day. I got to run back and take care of the kids, but it's been a real pleasure, Niko.
Yeah, awesome,
Always good to talk to you. I feel like people need to really have these conversations every day now. To remind ourselves where we're at.
I feel like it's hard for you to be in a position that you're in. Being an attorney, being part of a massive lawsuit that's very high profile, writing this book and trying to balance really the family life as well.
It's hard. It's mostly a psychological thing. And for me, it's dealing with sort of we've been talking about changing consciousness a lot. My personal change in consciousness has been enormous over the past couple of years. And, I thought I knew a lot.
Right.
And then I realized how little I know. And I think a lot of people may, it's a hard thing to admit to yourself that, that you've been laboring in ignorance, and you may still be laboring in ignorance
to a degree,
But I think
now it's really we've really grown. I don't feel like I'm laboring in ignorance anymore. I feel like I think that there are things that I don't know, and I'm comfortable with admitting I don't know, and I'm willing to learn if the evidence ever presented itself. And I think that's where the majority of the population needs to be at, because we're not there. Everybody is they told me, so it's true.
Right.
And I'm not. I'm always asking questions now instead of asserting something.
Right. That's definitely a step forward, and I think that's why those of us that maybe feel like we see more than we've seen before, we have a responsibility to sort of lift up our fellow citizens to that position, as painful as that is, because I'm sure a lot of people have been in a situation where maybe they've tried to help somebody who has a medical condition or, a problem or an addiction or something. And, sometimes the hardest thing to do is to try to help somebody who doesn't believe they need any help.
Yeah.
And to sort of keep going in that endeavor and to, take the abuse that comes with it and take, the hardship that comes with telling people things that, they don't want to hear, and they're going to direct their anger at. It's very, very difficult to maintain, your sort of focus in the face of that. It's and I'm finding it difficult. On the other hand, I don't really see another alternative, honestly, that doesn't involve, extreme instability and violence. And unfortunately, as each day goes on without seeing solutions from the top, which is ultimately where we need action, it's depressing. But we have to keep pushing from the bottom because ultimately that's what we can control.
So with that being said, thank you all so much for tuning in once again. And always remember, ladies and gentlemen, find your balance. Peace.
All right. Well, that was fun, man. I enjoyed that discussion. I'd love to go longer. Unfortunately, I gotta actually roll right now. But
I was gonna ask you,